Did I actually read anything in the month of December? Let's find out. Hello everyone, welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris. Today's video is my December wrap-up, or lack thereof. Before we jump into that, make sure you check in the description box down below for links to my Discord and other social media, should you want to come along for the ride. Now, December has been a hot mess. It is currently the 31st of December at the time of filming. I finished my last book for December today, and I read a total of 5 things, 4 of which I can actually talk about because one was an alpha read for an author that it's a book that will be coming out in 2023. I can't talk about it. So, the first book I read was an alpha read for an author that I can't talk about. I apologize. But the other 4 things that I read, I had a pretty good time with, and it just took me a lot longer than I thought to get into any sort of reading this month. My grandmother passed away towards the end of November, so we were dealing with that. I got some sort of illness that may or may not have been COVID, so I was out of action for a few days. I started a new job. It was super busy in my old job leading up to me leaving and going to my new job, and we're moving in a week's time. So it's just, there's been a bit happening, and reading just unfortunately fell by the wayside. But we're here, we'll carry on, we'll talk about the things that I actually read. To start us off, we had A Taste of Golden Iron. This was by Alexandra Rowland, or Roland, depending on how you pronounce it. I was genuinely shocked at how much I enjoyed this male slow burn fantasy romance. Fantasy romance is normally an anti-buzzword for me, but I have come to not necessarily gravitate towards fantasy romance. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just I don't shy away from the genre as much as I had done previously. I definitely don't go, oh, fantasy romance, I'll pick that up. If I look into a book more and the blurb intrigues me, if there's something going on outside of the romance plot, then I'm not such a hater anymore. I've learnt that throughout 2022 just by having some romance elements in fantasy that I've read that I've actually enjoyed. There is a book coming out in January called The Briar Crown by Helen Rye Peterson, and that was the first sort of fantasy romance that I actively read as being part of a beta read team, and I was again shocked at how much I liked it, which then pushed me, not only because I wanted to read this with Roger from Roger's Reads, but then pushed me to pick up and be more open to this genre with A Taste of Golden Iron. With A Taste of Golden Iron, we're following a prince character who I've forgotten the name of, and his bodyguard or bodyguard equivalent called Evermere. And I think the reason that I enjoyed it so much was because I related to Evermere a lot. He was very stuck in his ways. He liked the rules. He doesn't know how to express emotions. He prefers not to. He prefers to just make sure that we're following X, Y, and Z to do the tasks that are set for us. And I definitely relate to that as a human. I get nervous around people expressing extreme emotions. I know, I hear it. And the way that he felt about Kylo, I really can't remember the name of the other person. The way that he felt about this prince character who was like presented as effeminate and prissy and woe is me, I live in a castle and I can't do anything for myself. I thought that this other character was ridiculous, and basically how Evermere's character developed feelings towards our prince character was how I developed feelings towards that prince character throughout the entire book, and I became more and more invested in this relationship and in this story. I will say the plot of the book is very loose. We have some sort of investigation going on that the prince needs to figure out what's happening there, and that is how they come together and sort of do a whole bunch of stuff within the plot. But it's very loose. It is a super character driven sort of romance story, very slow burn. Like I said, don't expect anything to happen for like 400 pages, but it was a good time, and because I related so hard to the character, I ended up giving it something like a 4-star. I had a decent time with it. I will say that the themes of anxiety throughout the book were very well explored, and I appreciated the way that that unraveled and the conversations that were there surrounding that particular mental ailment, and I just think it was beautifully done, and Alexandra Rowland wrote a beautiful book. It was pretty, very pretty prose, very simple in storyline, and it was just a character story of two people happening to come together in a way that I related to. After I read A Taste of Golden Iron, I listened to Town Under, which is Systems Apocalypse Book 1, Systems Apocalypse Australia Book 1 by Katie Hanna and Tao Wong. This is a literary RPG, and if I had read this physically, I would have DNF'd it so hard after like 2 chapters. But because I was listening to it, it was a really fun time. I gave it 3 stars. Like, when I say really fun, like, it was an okay time, but it was fun enough for me and my needs, my mental needs within December with all this stuff going on. Had a good time with it. It entertained me. It was an entertaining listen. I think it was about 13 hours long, and we start off in where I went to university, so it was, you know, close to my heart. We followed an area that I'm currently living in, essentially, and then I will be moving from this, so don't stalk me if you go and listen to this book, because I won't be here anymore. But we started where my old university was in the book, and then we have a mother and her 2 kids. All the systems go down, they come back on, and they say, you're now in a dungeon world, and you need to figure out how to survive within this dungeon world. Pick classes and skill sets and go throughout their lives and try and figure out what's happened. As they go out into, you know, the city and the suburban areas that are within that suburb, mutated Australian wildlife come out, and they've got to get rid of them to level up. The thing that took me out of the book was the leveling up system. You basically, so I was listening to it, you heard every time that you got to level up, like, congratulations, you're now level blah, and then it went through all the stats each time, and I think that if I was reading that, I would just have either skimmed it really quickly or put it down and not come back to it. But I had a pretty fun time. It was very Australian, it was unapologetically Australian, so if you want to get a little bit of a culture shock without actually coming here and braving the heat and the wildlife, this book is probably a good way to go. But I had a fun time there. The next one I read was the Buddy Reed continuation, which was A Man Betrayed by J.V. Jones, Book of Words, Book 2. I liked the first one, gave it a 3.5. I feel very similarly about the second book. It continues on the story. I would say it's middle book syndrome, not that it's slower. It definitely builds, and there is more character development, more plot development, more of those political machinations coming through, so you understand why the events in book 1 have played out the way that they have, and then we build on that in book 2. The prose is tighter, the characters are tighter, the plot gets tighter, but we haven't gotten to a point yet, in my opinion, where the conclusion, the climax, is coming to the forefront, and I assume that will happen in the last book, Master and Fool, which we'll read in January. And the last thing I read, which I finished today, was No Heart for a Thief by James Lloyd Doolan. This was an ARC read, so thank you, James Lloyd Doolan, for allowing me to be part of your ARC team. This book was different, and it was a very refreshing take on the past life trope, where you've got someone who has been through an event and is now taking the reader through the event from their present self. It follows Kalo and a young girl named Tayan, I think her name is, if I'm remembering correctly, and Kalo has ostracized himself. He has taken himself out of society after an event that's happened, and he starts to hear murmurings of Gaust soldiers and this military group which is trying to take over the world. When he hears that and there's distress happening, he goes out into the world and he finds Tayan, which was somewhere between 12 and 14, a young girl being hunted by these soldiers, and he steps in to help. From there, they come together. She doesn't trust him. She's just lost everything, essentially, in a similar way to him losing everything when he was of a similar age. And he takes her through his backstory while they are currently going through their own storyline in the present. These two storylines and two timelines interweave quite beautifully, but we definitely have a two split timeline period where we are following the same main protagonist. And the plot lines sort of match up with what happens in each timeline. It seems to be sort of coming around full circle, and we get to a conclusion at the end once his story has finished, which leads on to the next book, I would assume. My favorite thing about this book is definitely the magic system. Kalo is a spirit thief. He has the ability to steal spirits from other people. There are 7 spirits in total, with the 7th being the thief, and they have the ability to borrow spirits from others. This was quite beautifully explained. They are dancers, so people who can use the spirits are dancers, and they listen for the song, and if they can dance, it means that they can pull on different spirits. For example, you have a shadow spirit, which is what our character Tayan is. She can manipulate shadows to get around. So by being a spirit thief, Kalo can then take the shadow and use it for himself for a period of time. I thought it was fascinating. I really enjoyed the magic system, and I can't wait to have it develop more in the coming books. Those are the books that I read in December. It wasn't a huge reading month for me. I'm hoping to crack on in January and have a really decent reading month, but we'll see. We are moving. I'm going to Sydney for the new job. We'll just see what happens and take it as it comes. What was your favorite read of December? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like the content, give it one of those. If you want to see more of it, click subscribe at your will. I'll catch you in the next video. Ciao.